Day out here in the wooded area again, and we're going to be looking at some scripture. Today we're looking at Psalms 14, and we're also going to be looking at Genesis 27 and 28. So Psalms 14, it begins interesting because this is the atheist psalm. This is the one that says, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt, they've done abominable works, there is none that doeth good." This one is quoted by Paul later on in Romans when it says, "There's none that righteous, no, not one." You get the idea that people were not seeking after God. God had to come down to man and reveal himself through actions, through words, and he had to come to man. Man wasn't calling out for him. We realized in the Old Testament this is God initiating. Now man has a responsibility to respond. That's free will. But it's always been that God initiated to come down and talk with man. And here he goes that nobody. The fool says in his heart there is no God. And they were all workers of iniquity. It's the idea that being in iniquity is what's keeping you from finding the God of the universe. And they have shamed the counsel of the poor because God is the refuge of the poor. We keep seeing this same motif happening when God is defending the poor. That we see this constant, the powerful taking from the powerless, and God steps in and intercedes. And also these people that are calling out to God as their refuge. "Oh, that the salvation of Israel were brought back to Zion. When the Lord bringeth back the captivity of his people, Jacob shall rejoice, and Israel shall be glad." You get the feeling that this is an intermediary time when evil is happening and men are preying upon other men. But God is still the refuge, and he will move for the sake of his promises to Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, into the children of Israel. He will fulfill this promise. He will bring them out of captivity. Not just the captivity of Babylonianism, but the captivity of their sin and their sinfulness to God. But yeah, this begins talking about the atheist, and it goes to the rightness of God when he will bring back the captivity of his people. And he has invited all the Gentiles to join his people through his son. So this is a very good psalm. Of course, I haven't found any bad psalms, to tell you the truth. But I understand and appreciate what it is saying about the status of man, that man did not call out to God to save them. God freely offered salvation to man. Very interesting psalm. We're covering in Genesis an interesting passage, which it's hard to cover without moving ahead and seeing preset implications of what's being said here. So I just want to go into it. We're trying to stick mostly with an evidentiary look at the scriptures, not a conclusionary look. For me to draw conclusions first on the scriptures. You know, I was talking with my wife that I'm trying to view the scriptures as you would if in some of these crime dramas where they look at the crime scene. You don't touch it, you just kind of build a grid. You look at what's in the grid, and after you've seen the whole grid, you go back and decide what these things mean based on where they are and how they're placed, where the footprints are, if there's a bloody handprint. We've all seen these murder shows. And the idea of letting the evidence lead you to conclusion instead of letting conclusion taint the evidence. So I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to stick mostly with the evidentiary viewpoint of the Bible. And this talks about that Isaac had gotten old and he was getting ready to bless his son. Now this blessing was not just Isaac blessing as a patriarch. He was passing on the promise of God from Abraham that was promised to his father, and now it was just promised to him. God reiterated this at Bethel, that I will bless them and bless you, and curse them and curse you. God is going to pass on the blessing of God. This is not just the blessing of Jacob. Later on, he does bless Esau, but he cannot give Esau the blessing that God had given to Abraham, and then God had given to Isaac, and now Isaac was passing on this to his son. So it's a different kind of blessing. And he says that he's getting old, and he asks Esau to go and get some venison, go make his favorite meal, and then come in, and there'll be a blessing. Rebekah hears this, and she and Jacob conspire to fool Isaac into giving the blessing to Jacob. And his mother even said, "Upon me be thy curse, only obey my voice and fetch them to me." So really, the mom is kind of running the show here. And she does face a bit of a curse. Later on, we'll find that she wants her son to be gone because of the anger of his brother for a few days. Well, that few days becomes 14 years. So she is bereft of the son that she's trying to lift up to power, and she's going to lose him for 14 years. So they go, and Rebecca provides this meal that Isaac had wanted. They put a hairy cloak on Jacob so he feels and smells like his brother. Isaac's eyes are dim, so he has a hard time discerning, and it's very possible these brothers also kind of facially resembled one another, as brothers will do. So he put the skins on, they made the savory meat, he went in to his father and gave it to his father. His father asked, "Who are you?" And he says, "Oh, I'm Esau. And how have you done this so quickly?" And then he does something that I didn't see till today. He invokes the name of God into his lie. He goes, how have you got this so quickly? The Lord thy God brought it to me. That was a lie. And for him to go so far as to evoke the name of God into his lie. I mean, everybody always hounds on, well, Esau despised his birthright. Esau is a bad guy. Here's Jacob evoking God's name into his lie. And he is doing these bad things. I realize, and I will make the statement that from an evidentiary source, both of them are equally bad in places. Both of them are equally good in places. You'll see strong repentance when this story is over. Spoilers. That there is a reconciliation between the brothers and forgiveness from one brother to another. So we're going to see that good things happen, but right now there are lies going on. He says, "Let me kiss you." He leans over, and Isaac feels, and this is the hands, and it's the smell of Esau. So he's doing his best to make to understand who he's dealing with. So he turns around and blesses him and says, "Therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and the plenty of corn and wine. Let the people serve thee and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's son bow before thee. Cursed be anyone that curseth thee, and blessed be anyone that blesseth thee." That is the blessing of God that God gave Abraham. And then God gave Isaac at Bethel. And now Isaac is passing this specific godly blessing on to who he thinks it's Esau, but it's actually Jacob. This is, he can't take this back. You've made the blessing. Now, I was talking today with my wife that it's like the promissory note is the birthright, but the blessing is the authority. Now, at this point, he has the authority he has been promoted. He can now, when Isaac is gone, he can be the king. He can rule. And he has this power of God, from the word of God, to do these things. It isn't just Jacob, not just a blessing of a man to a son. This is the blessing of God from Isaac to Jacob. So it's a very powerful thing. And Jacob leaves, and he'd been gone just a short time, and here comes Esau. Esau comes in, and then they realize what's happened, and Isaac starts trembling that he has been deceived. And they both weep over the fact that this was stolen, that there was deception going on. And he says, "Bless me, oh bless me, my father." And he says, thy brother has taken with subtlety and has taken away thy blessing." He does bless his son Esau. He says that, "Behold, thy dwelling shall be in the fatness of the land and the dew of the heaven of above, and by thy sword thou shalt live, and thou shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass that thou shalt have dominion, and thou shalt break his yoke over his neck from off his neck." The idea that now there's going to be consternation of the tribes of these groups because of this deception. Would God have gone ahead and done this without the deception? Yes, because God had already ordained this. I know I get a lot of people that are conclusionary, drawing, well, God had established the deception as part of... I don't get in too much into conclusional Christianity, because you have to look at the evidence and be careful what you add. That's something that I've tried to reiterate again and again. Be careful what you add to the scriptures to make it make sense to a conclusion that's already preset. I will use the terms of implication, and if so, I'm just using that in a more forensic sense. The implication here that this is this and that is that. But I try not to draw conclusions first. But yeah, you see some animosity that might not have been had they let God work out the blessings of Isaac. the blessings of Isaac to Jacob. Esau hated his brother, and his father had died, and he was going to mourn for his father many days, and then he decided to slay his brother. Rebekah hears about this and tells Jacob to flee for a few days. Remember, I mentioned that earlier. Flee for a few days, go off and hang with my brother in Haran, and then when your brother will get over this, and then you can come back and be the king. And he says this also. One of the reasons why Rebekah gives a little bit of a tell here. She says, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. She had a reason why she didn't want Esau having the birthright, because Esau had married women who believed in foreign gods. They were of the Hittites, and they were not of their family and their belief structure. And you get the idea that they were just wearisome, they were cumbersome, they were selfish, they were ungodly in the sense of not following this God, and they were probably just a bunch of pains to be around, and they were selfish and self-centered. And she said, they weary me, and if Jacob takes a wife of these people, I don't know what to do. And she realizes also that Esau would be her Lord, and that would also give these women more power over her. She would go, and this is not her trying to hold on to power for herself, but she realizes, these women would be, it would be like a Sarah-Hagar relationship, except she would be Hagar in this relationship. So what's happening is she sends him away. So Isaac blesses him. I mean, he doesn't hate his son. He sends him off with a blessing. And he goes off to Paddan Aram to his brother's house. And he does say that, and he backs up the blessing that he's already given. He's going to be honorable to God and back up this blessing, that the God will bless thee and multiply thee, that thou mayst be a multitude, and give thee the blessing of Abraham. So he already has the blessing. So he's going ahead and fulfilling the promise of God through Abraham so that the promise might go on. One thing I've noticed here, that it's often the promise and not the personalities. We get lost in the personalities. Was this person good? Was this person bad? What kind of person were they? Well, the promise is still what's most important. Both of these people had their struggles. Israel would have their struggles. Israel would turn away. 10 nations would turn away eventually. And of the 2 that survived, they would also be taken into captivity, and only a small remnant of them would come back. This is the promise. It's not the personalities. We get lost in what is salvation, what is not, who got saved, who didn't, But we forget that it's the promise of God. We are the beneficiaries of promise. And so it's the promises of God that are holding sway here, not the personalities. So he leaves, and Esau saw that Isaac was blessed. Then he went off and got him another wife. And he picks a wife of Ishmael, one of Ishmael's granddaughters, that he goes in and brings in another wife. If you think the Hittite wife was bad, I'm going to bring you this Ishmaelite, who is, again, to create more problems. But he is now going to be the king. He's now going to be the leader of the family. He's now going to be the authority. So we see this happening with Esau, now that Isaac is gone. Jacob, in the last part of this chapter, he has this dream from God. And it's that dream where he talks about the ladder. He went to sleep on his way to Haran, and he saw a ladder going up to heaven, and angels going up and down this ladder. And God comes and reiterates to him. See, God has reiterated to the people, the man in charge, that of this, again, this promise. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and they shall spread abroad to the east and the west, and to the north and the south. And in thee and thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Once again, this is messianic. This is promising. This is the God promise. This is the promise of Christ. This is messianic. And so you see that he has stated this to Abraham. He stated it to Isaac. Now he's stating it to Jacob. This is important, that God is reiterating this promise that he had made. And he is backing the promise, not just the person. He works with the person, but he backs the promise. And that's something in all of our lives as Christians we have to realize, that God often backs the promises of Christ through my sinful person. We kind of sometimes get lost in the person, my activities and what I do, but how is the promise being fulfilled in my life? So, and I am with thee, and I will keep thee in the places whither thou goest, and I will bring thee again to this land. he has that promise. Even though it'd be 14 years before he would come back to this land, he had this promise. And I will never leave thee, nor until I have done what I have spoken of thee. I will not leave you, even though you're going off to this countryside to stay there. And Jacob awoke. Surely the Lord Yahweh is in this place, and I knew it not. How dreadful is this place? And there is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate to heaven, because of what he had experienced. Now you get the idea. This is the first experience that he had had with God. And so here he is. And he calls the place Bethel, and he vows the vows, if God will be with me and keep me in the way and give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, then I will come to my father's house in peace. He's not going to come back with the sword. He's coming back in peace to take over his rightly authority. You would think that he would be thinking that I'm going to need a sword to wrestle this from Esau. But I'm not going to need the sword, because God is the one who will fulfill this promise, not me. He has promised that he would do it, that he would not leave me until he has brought me back into the land. And so he puts up a stone and sets up a pillar. And he even vows that he will give a tenth to God because of what he's done here. But there are powerful things here again, if I can't reiterate over and over the idea of the promise of God versus the personalities. We get lost in personalities sometimes. But here is God dealing with the promise. So I really enjoyed what I got out of this and what I've learned. And I just